I have finally found the best way to play Orbeetle VMax, which is going to allow you to be super consistent as well as dealing massive damage, and you can also get the benefit of spreading damage across all of your opponent's board, which is way more efficient than any of those Inteleon decks that you've been playing. Let's get into the deck profile and some battles, and of course if you're new here, be sure to subscribe down below as I do post videos multiple times a week. Taking a look at Orbeetle VMax, the ability here is the key to the deck as well as the attack, but I really love playing the deck for the ability Eerie Beam. Once during your turn, you can put 10 damage onto each of your opponent's Pokemon in play, and you can use this multiple times in your turn for each of your Orbeetle. So you can only use it once, but we're playing 4 Orbeetle, so typically you'll have 2 or 3 Orbeetle in play, and you switch between those so that you can stack up Eerie Beam multiple times in a turn. And that is going to put 20 or 30 damage on all of your opponent's Pokemon in a single turn, and that really builds up very quickly, but that also works towards the attack. G-Max Wave for just 2 energy, you deal 50 damage, but you deal an additional 50 damage for each of the energy attached to the defending Pokemon. So typically in the current format, you're going to have Pokemon that have 3 energy attached to them. So on average, you're dealing 200 damage. And that is very good, as you can easily knock out those Pokemon in 2 hit, or if you've built up enough Eerie Beams, you are going to get them in a 1 hit attack, just from the fact that you've used Eerie Beam so many times. Also means that you can take knockouts from the ability and then go ahead and attack, so you can get multiple knockouts in a turn. Looking at the rest of the deck here, we have a very aggressive build, and this is why I feel that this build is finally something that works for me and actually is effective in getting your Orbeetles set up and drawing through your deck, because that is the real issue. You have to have so many Orbeetles on your deck, or on your bench and in play, that you're not able to draw through your deck. But with this build, we have Cinccino's very heavy line of Cinccino 3/3 line. In order to use the Make Do ability, you discard a card and then draw 2 cards. So we just draw cards very quickly through the deck. Sometimes you do actually have to watch out that you don't deck out, but it's very useful as we have lots of switching cards that we need to use, and Make Do allows us to do that. And I have also used the attack here. Energy Assist does deal 40 damage and can set up another Orbeetle on the bench if we don't have the energy for it. Having a look at the deck itself then as a whole, we also have a couple of Snorlax for that early game. If your hand is looking a little bit rough, then the Snorlax with Gormandise is very good for drawing cards. Then we just have a lot of consistency here, 4 Quick Balls and then 3 Evil Instants, 3 Level Ball, as well as the 3 Turf Field. Search out all of our Pokemon very easily, as we have a bunch of different Pokemon with different requirements, so these combinations of trainers allow us to do that. We also have a couple of, a full playset of Bird Keeper here. Allows you to switch your active Pokemon with a bench Pokemon, and you also draw 3 cards. Drawing 3 is not a huge amount, but we get an additional switch, which is crucial as we want to switch around as much as possible. And like I said, drawing 3 is going to be fine, since we do have Make Do to make use of on the Cinccino. We do also have a couple of Boss and Cheryl, so if we want to use Cheryl, we don't have to worry about drawing cards, because Make Do is going to make up for the fact that we're not drawing cards with the Cheryl, which does heal all damage on our Orbeetles, and can potentially close out games if we just need to clear all of the damage off of our board. We do lose all of our energy in play as well, but if we just need a couple more turns of Eerie Beam, then that can help us do it, and then, like I said, the Cinccino can build up some extra energy onto our VMAXs if need be. We also have multiple copies of things like switches and air balloons, so that we can easily retreat around our board as you would expect. And then only a couple of Professor Research and Marnie, because we are typically drawing and having a large hand, so we don't want to be discarding all of those useful cards with things like Research, but Marnie is certainly still useful. And we do also have a Pal Pad in here if we want to reuse Birdkeeper, Cheryl, or even Boss's Orders to bring up a big threat that my opponent is building up. And then we do also have 1 copy of Ordinary Rod here, just in case we need to shuffle in some Orbeetles that get knocked out or discarded, or we need some extra energies, then Ordinary Rod always helps out and provides whatever you need. Super fun deck, as always. Like I said, I've been really working at trying to build the best possible Orbeetle VMax deck because I just really enjoy the card and enjoy using the ability. So let's get into a couple of games here, see how we get on, and show off just how effective this build of the deck is and how quickly we can draw through our deck and get towards all of the cards that we need in order to close out games. We're heading into our first game here, and we were lucky enough to win the coin flip, so I have opted to go first. It is certainly better to go first with this deck, since you do get to get your first attachment down, and in this situation we do have our capture energy, which we can slap onto the Orbeetle V here, get out another Pokemon. Probably going to go for the other Orbeetle, well, another Orbeetle, since we do already have the level ball in our hand. Looks like we have all of our Orbeetle Vs here, and we have priced 1 VMax, but that shouldn't be a problem, I don't think. Looks like we have a lot of everything else, really. As long as you have plenty of switching cards, you should be good to go. And we have a level ball here that we can also make use of to grab out a Minccino, so that we can get that Cinccino down on the following turn. Going to go for a Gormandize with our Snorlax, draw a couple of extra cards to top up our hand here, and we have a very nice selection to choose from. We got that Orbeetle VMax for the following turn, as well as a bunch of good items in order to search out everything that we need. My opponent is going to be putting down a Path to the Peak, which is going to be a little bit of an issue for this deck, and really the main thing that holds the deck back is Path to the Peak, just like what we've seen with the Eternatus VMax deck. The last video that I did in standard format, it is certainly a very powerful stadium card, and one that you have to be playing around or having plenty of stadium cards in order to counter it, and we were lucky enough to have our turf field in our opening hand, so not a problem here to counter it. And of course my opponent is playing a high energy attack cost deck, so even without our abilities we should be in a good spot here. We do have the turf field that I will play down before we do anything else, just so that we can thin the deck of the Orbeetle VMax and ensure that we get some good draws here. Get that down into play. We also have our Bird Keeper. We do have to move the Snorlax, so we'll Bird Keeper here into our Orbeetle with the energies, just to guarantee that we're going to get the attack off. Looks like we do have the air balloon though that we're going to draw into, so we could have gone into the other Orbeetle, but this is totally fine. We also have the Make Do that we can make use of, so I think we could go for a level ball for another Cinccino, or Minccino in this case, and we also have a couple of cards that we can discard with the Make Do. I think we'll go with the Evolution Incense for now, as we can always make use of the Quick Ball on the following turn if we want to. And we do draw some decent cards here, so I will just double Quick Ball, or at least get rid of one of these Quick Balls, and we'll get ourselves another Orbeetle V into play so that we can get a third VMax down, and we'll just go for an attack here, dealing 100 damage, not quite enough to get a knockout, and like I said, this does have 120 HP, so if we'd got that other Eerie Beam off, then we would have been able to get the knockout there, so a little bit unfortunate that we did draw into the air balloon. Not something that you want to see, but that's alright, as long as my opponent doesn't get the Path to the Peak, then we should be able to just go ahead and use Eerie Beam for the knockout, which would be ideal. My opponent does get the switch here, and they're going to be bringing up the Gardevoir. Does deal a significant amount of damage, of course. 180 is nothing to scoff at, as they will be able to hit us, and they're also dealing 50 damage at a time, but they do have a lot of energy on them, so we're still going to be able to deal a significant amount of damage. We of course have the switch as well that we can make use of in order to go into another Eerie Beam if we want to. Let's use our first Eerie Beam here to take our prize card on the Cresselia and see what we get into. Just a capture energy, nothing too useful there, and I suppose we could certainly attach it. Get rid of the grass energy is perfectly fine, so we'll go for that. Putting it onto the VMax, we also want to attach an air balloon. We'll go for the switch as well, so we get an additional Eerie Beam while we have the option to do so. get out our other Orbeetle VMax as well as use our Evil Incense to get ourselves a second Cincino here, which is the perfect setup. We do have the Snorlax, which is a little bit of a liability. Of course, if my opponent uses a boss's orders, they could try and stall, but we do have a couple of switches and bird keepers in the deck, so it shouldn't be too much of a problem. And now we can make do getting rid of any cards that aren't going to be useful, as we already have all of our basics and evolutions in play, so we certainly don't need these cards. Get those out of the deck and draw additional cards, and this is really where the deck comes into a kind of lane of its own, or league of its own I should say, as you can just draw so many cards and ensure that you have everything that you need at every point of the game, which is perfect. Now we are going to be giving up 3 prize cards here, but in exchange we are dealing 250 damage because my opponent opted to attach a 4th energy for some reason. Now they do have the tool card here, which means that they get to put an energy from our Pokemon back into our hand, but that's perfectly fine by me, as like I said, we're going to get knocked out anyways, so we actually just get to keep an energy around, which is even better. Now my opponent is going to play the Marnie, which is a little unfortunate, but we do have the double Cincino down, so we should be able to draw out of this pretty nicely, as well as using the turf field if we want to shuffle our deck as well. There is the knockout, but my opponent has so much damage on them. Healing 50 is just not going to be relevant whatsoever. They do only have a 3 energy attack cost, so a little bit confused as to why they would go ahead and attach a 4th energy. So it makes it easier for us to get knockouts. We will be promoting our Orbeetle, of course. I'll go ahead and attach, and we will use the turf field here just so that we can shuffle the deck, and the cards that got put onto the bottom with Marnie are going to be shuffled around and not on the bottom of the deck. Now we do get a Marnie as well, a couple of switching cards. I think we'll want to hold on to those. I think we can make do a grass energy. We do still have plenty in the deck, and we do have the ordinary rod if we want to get them back at all. Don't really think there's any supporters here. Potentially the Marnie, I suppose we could play that. Try and mess up my opponent, give them a smaller hand. So we'll go with the Marnie here and see what we draw into. Nothing that we're looking for on our end though. And we get into a similar looking hand. The Sherrills could help stall a little bit, but I think we're just looking to get as much damage in as possible right here. And we'll get a return knockout, dealing another 250 damage and taking 3 prize cards. Now of course my opponent still gets to put that energy back into our hand, but that is just going to slow us down a little bit, as it means that we have to attach onto the active rather than getting an attachment onto the bench. But that's totally fine by me, as my opponent does have such a high attack cost. They're also going to be taking a long time in order to get another attack off here, so we should be in a perfect spot. There is the boss's orders. As I predicted, they're bringing up the Snorlax to try and stall for a bit, but we have the Bird Keeper in our hand already, so we can easily just switch out of this. Going into our Orbeetle VMax once again, also getting an additional 3 cards off of our deck. There's nothing else that we really need to draw here, so I'm quite content with this hand. I suppose we could always quick ball away and make do away some of the cards that we don't really need, like the Cincinos and Minchinos that we have spares in the deck, so we'll get rid of one of those, make do once. We can also level ball, see if the other one is in there. It is indeed, so we can make do away that as well, since we're not going to need it at this point in the game. And we're only going to be drawing cards that we do want to have around, so seems like a good trade-off to me. Nothing else that we can do here, so I will just attack my opponent, not doing a substantial amount, only 100 this time around, as my opponent just has 1 energy. But if they try and attach again, which they have to do if they want to try and attack us, then we are going to be increasing our damage. Now here comes the ice lollies again, just like what happened before, and my opponent is going to get so many heads. This always happens to me, it seems. And okay, there's a tails. They did heal a significant amount of damage, but we should be in a good spot here. We're dealing 150 damage at the moment, and they already have 70 on them, so 250 remaining. We can't quite knock them out, but we are getting fairly close to being in range here. We do also have the Bird Keepers if we want to Eerie Beam again, which I really don't hate. I don't think it's going to be super good though, as if my opponent uses a boss's orders again, they're going to try and bring up the Snorlax. So I think we'll hold on to the rest of this hand and just hit into my opponent for 150. And then on the following turn we can get game, as my opponent will be attaching an energy. If they have it, they can hit us for 180, but then we have game on them, dealing way more than what we need to do to get the knockout there. So very nice easy win against a Gardevoir VMax deck, which is certainly a fun deck, and I've been considering checking that one out. So let's get into another one, see how we get on. Game 2, and we're once again starting with the Snorlax, which is great. My opponent has the Rapid Strike Sobble, so they'll be looking to play some sort of sniping damage onto us potentially, or just looking to use the shady dealing abilities in order to get the trainer cards that they need. They do get down an early Rowlet here, so perhaps using the Decidueye, which is a reasonable Pokemon for sure, but not going to be super effective against us, I have to say. We don't really have much that we can play out here against the Turffield, but that is going to be helping my opponent. We could also Bird Keeper, but then we don't get a lot off the Snorlax, and I do want to keep the Bird Keeper around. So I think we'll just Gormandize here for one card. Not super helpful. Cheryl is also not great, so we will be forced to use the Bird Keeper on this following turn, but at the very least we will have the Make Do available on Cincino, and that should draw us up some cards quite nicely. My opponent has the Evolution Incense, they are grabbing the Decidueye, which means that they have the rare candy in their hand or a means of getting it, and as we can see they do have the Drizzile with shady dealings so that they can just grab themselves that rare candy, go into the Decidueye and easily start attacking us once they get that grass energy down, of course. Looks like they have absolutely everything that they need in their hand though. They've got the rare candy plus the Decidueye, and they've also got the research, but they've opted not to use Professor's research for some interesting reason. I'm guessing they have a card they're wanting to use, like Inteleon, in their hand already. They do also get down the big Parasol on the Decidueye. As long as this Pokemon's in the active spot, prevent all effects of attacks from your opponent's Pokemon done to each of your Pokemon. Now, this doesn't include abilities, so we should still be good to use Eerie Beam here, and that's really going to put us in a good spot as we can continuously use Eerie Beam and put damage on my opponent's Pokemon without having to actually damage them with an attack. Let's Bird Keeper here to draw 3 cards. We get even more Orbeetle VMaxes, which is certainly not what I'm looking for. I think we can get rid of one of these for the time being and draw another 2 cards. We get a Level Ball, which can certainly get us another Minccino here, and we also have the Capture Energy, which is something, I guess. We can do 40 damage or we can just retreat with a Air Balloon going to the Snorlax, as this is going to get knocked out if we don't. And yeah, I think we will go for that, as it's the only means of actually drawing cards at the moment, which is a little bit scary, but we'll attach the Capture Energy, means that we can finally get out an Orbeetle V, and we also have the Turffield, but like I said, that is going to be helping my opponent. Don't really want to use the Pal Pad, so we'll just pass over to my opponent, and we are finally getting towards an attack here. My opponent has the Grass Energy, and yep, as expected, they did hold on to the Inteleon with Quick Shooting, means that they can put 20 damage onto any of our Pokemon, and really just build up their damage, as the Decidueye also deals bench damage, which is going to be good for them to stack up and try to take multiple knockouts here. Since our Cincinos do of course have quite low HP, we do finally get another Orbeetle, which is nice. We really need these Orbeetles to be down as quickly as possible here. We have the Turffield, which I'm going to get rid of with Make Do. Like I said, I don't want to be helping my opponent at all, and we already drew into all of our VMAXs, so we really don't need to get any more at the moment. Let's go for a Capture Energy to get out a 3rd Orbeetle V, and what can also Level Ball, search out a low HP Pokemon and then use Make Do in order to discard it. as that's going to help us to draw some more cards here, which we desperately need. We do get into a Bird Keeper, so we can finally start using Eerie Beam. We get into a couple of decent draws here for the following turn, which is quite nice. We'll go for our first Eerie Beam, pass over to my opponent and see what they do. We do have the boss's orders we can make use of, and we do also have things like Cheryl, which is going to come in crucial in this matchup in order to heal off all of the damage that we're going to be taking here, because ideally we are just going to be switching between our Pokemon, and that means that my opponent is only going to be building up damage on one Orbeetle VMax at a time. Hopefully they don't have things like boss's orders readily available though, but they are going into their Drizzles quite quickly here, which is very reassuring as they really need those to search out those trainers. But they do have the quick shooting Inteleon, which, like I said, is going to be building up that extra damage and making it easier for my opponent to take knockouts here. That's why something like a Scoop Up Net is a very good consideration in this deck, as it means that you can then pick up your Pokemon. Things like the Snorlax would be then easier to move, but we aren't going for that route. We're just going for heavy switching and only playing down the Snorlax when we have to, and it typically works out quite well, but not always. We'll go for a Eerie Beam again, of course. Then we can also Bird Keeper into the other VMAX that we have here, so that we can Eerie Beam once again to pick up some more energies, which isn't super useful, but that's alright. We'll Eerie Beam, and then we do have our Air Balloon that we can use to retreat, and we'll go into the Cincino here. We could also make do a couple of cards. I mean, getting rid of the research isn't too bad here, since we do have make do. We don't need research to draw cards. We're drawing fine without them. We do also have the second make do, so we can get rid of a quick ball here as well. Draw another 2 cards. Not anything too super good, but that's alright. We can also get extra energy into play, so we can quick ball here to discard an energy. Search out another basic, just get a Snorlax, as we're probably going to be discarding it. And with nothing else left to do, we can use our Cincino to actually get an additional 40 damage into play, and we can attach a Grass Energy from the discard. I think we'll just be putting it onto our other Cincino here, so that we can once again deal 40 damage on the following turn, and stack that damage up on the active Decidueye here to get the knockout a little bit quicker. Now, on this following turn, we're going to be looking to get a third Orbeetle VMax, that is the hope. With our draws, that would really help us out here. But my opponent is going to be using quick shooting, of course, to get the knockout on our active, so we just have to decide who we're going to be promoting. We don't have any Bird Keepers, so if we do switch, then we'll have to use an actual switch. Or, of course, we could just go with something like the Orbeetle with the Air Balloon here, which seems like an easy option to go for, so we'll just go for that one. Man, my opponent has the Tool Scrapper. At least they are only discarding 1 Air Balloon, and we didn't put down 2 just yet, so that does help us out a little bit. If we have a look at the Decidueye, it does have 140 HP, so certainly not the highest amount of HP for a Stage 2 Pokemon, which should hopefully make it a little bit easier for us to get the knockout. They are going to be going for the attack, dealing 90 damage onto our active, and 20 damage onto our bench here, of course. We draw another Grass Energy, not super impressed with that one. Let's go for our first Eerie Beam of this turn. Then we can also switch into the benched Orbeetle VMax, I should say. We'll Eerie Beam for a second time. This puts my opponent's Decidueye up to 90 damage, so we need one more Eerie Beam in order to get the knockout this turn with our Cincino. So let's use it make do. We'll discard our Snorlax here. Hopefully we can draw into the Orbeetle VMax, and we do get it, which is awesome, but unfortunately we don't have another switching card. We just have a retreat that we can make use of. So I think we'll just retreat into the Cincino anyways here, and we'll of course be attaching energies, as we really need those in order to easily retreat as well. Make things a little bit easier that way. So we'll go for an attack here. We will be getting the knockout on the following turn with Eerie Beam, and we don't have any more energy in discard that we can reattach, unfortunately. But that's our turn. Nothing too crazy going on here. It's very much just going to be a game of attrition and outlasting our opponent with our Eerie Beams. And once we've switched around, a whole bunch will be able to use our Cheryl to heal off all of the damage on all of our VMAXs. Looks like my opponent also has some healing options though. They play down the Pokemon Center Lady, which is going to heal 60 damage from their active and put them out of range of being knocked out on this following turn. Very frustrating to have to deal with that, but my opponent does get an additional 20 damage down from that second Inteleon with quick shooting, which is going to allow them to get the knockout via an ability and get some additional damage onto the board with their attack from Decidueye. We'll promote a VMAX here. We do have plenty of options if we want to go ahead and Cheryl this turn, but probably going to be a bit early for that. And we could always boss's orders as well as a good option. Bring up something like an Inteleon, force them to have the energy to retreat it. Not terrible, but the fact that the Inteleon does only have a 1 retreat cost. And my opponent could also bring up the bench Decidueye, which has telescopic sight, which would make things even more difficult for us. So not a great amount of options right here. We'll go with a Eerie Beam to begin with, and of course we do have a decent amount of HP remaining. We have 130 HP, so I can hold off on the Cheryl for another turn until the following turn. We do also have a Grass Energy I could use to retreat this turn if I wanted to go into the one on the bench that has energy, so let's go with that, as it means that we get an extra Eerie Beam off across my opponent's board, and it does also protect that Orbeetle VMax, which could be useful. I think we'll just pass it over to my opponent since we do already have a large hand here. I don't really want to use something like Marnie to get rid of all these cards. I'd much rather just continuously draw cards. My opponent does have the Scoop Up Net, which is going to be resetting the active Decidueye. They certainly could have held it there for a little bit longer as they weren't in any danger just yet, but they do play the Scoop Up Net, so they're able to put that Decidueye back into their hand and put the Rowlet back into place so that they can build up the Decidueye again. And they're giving us a well played, so I'm guessing they're going to be able to do some big damage here. Yeah, they have the telescopic sight, so it's going to be dealing a lot of damage, and we do have the Cheryl though, so it's not quite well played from my opponent just yet. We have the Eerie Beams going to be spreading out some more damage, of course, and there's nothing else that we can play out here, so we will be retreating into another Orbeetle so that we can use Eerie Beam a second time before using our Cheryl to heal off all of this damage from all of our VMAXs. That is a couple of hundred damage just healed off in a matter of seconds, and then we can pass over to my opponent. They give us the worried face, which they very much should be, as we can continue to use Eerie Beam here for a good number of turns. They do have the quick shooting as well as the telescopic sight, which is going to be dealing a lot of damage onto the bench. They can potentially deal 90 damage here onto our bench, as they're dealing 50 from the attack plus the 20s from the Inteleon, so definitely a lot of damage onto our benched Pokemon. But we do have our Pal Pad, so we have a good few Cheryl that we can make use of here. We unfortunately don't have any switches though. We'd really like a switch or a bird keeper or even an air balloon. Any of those combinations of cards would be great here. We have one switch left in the deck. We do have our second Cheryl and we only have one air balloon, so not ideal. We do have a couple of energies though, which would be good here. We could also Marnie, but I suppose keeping around the Pal Pad is probably going to be more beneficial at the moment. So we'll pass over to my opponent again, as we don't have any rush of any cards that we need right now. We'll see what we'd need in the following turns though, as the Marnie would certainly draw us into some of the cards that we're looking for, things like the energies as well as the air balloons, that sort of thing, as all of these cards would go to the bottom of the deck, so Marnie would certainly draw us into those cards. But my opponent has another Scoop Up Net, looking to heal off some more damage here, potentially picking up the Inteleon if I had to guess. And okay, they do pick up one Inteleon, but not the one that I was thinking. Thought it was going to be the first one that they put down here, which has 100 damage on it, but hey ho, they put down one of them anyways. And that is going to be very irritating to deal with because it's going to make it extremely difficult for us to actually win this game. Usually it's not too bad, you can typically get off enough Eerie Beams, but in this case my opponent is playing the Scoop Up Nets, which is going to make it pretty impossible for us to actually go ahead and win this match, I have to say. We could go for boss's orders now, but I'm guessing they probably have plenty of energy still available, or at least some sort of switching card, as they're only down 2 energy. So I think we will just go for the Marnie at this point. Let's have a look at our discard pile, if there's anything that we want to shuffle into the deck. Probably just some energies, so we'll go with the Ordinary Rod first. We'll shuffle in a Orbeetle VMax so that we can play down another one. And I don't really want any of these Pokemon, so we'll just shuffle in the VMAX, and then we'll shuffle in the 2 grass energies as well, so that we can use those to retreat around. We could also hold off on the Pal Pad since we want to put Cheryl's into the deck, and we'll Quick Ball, get rid of the Research, don't really need that, and then we'll Marnie, put these cards on the bottom, and see if we can draw into some switching cards here, and we do get a switch, which is a switching card, but not the one that I was hoping for, I have to say. But we'll switch into a VMAX, and then we can also retreat as well, so we get maximum usage out of our Eerie Beams. So we'll go ahead and do that. We can retreat into the third, and Eerie Beam again. Put damage across all my opponent's board. Not any use in playing out any of the other cards. I mean, just the level ball was the only option there, but we don't have any Pokemon left to make use of that, so we'll keep it around just in case my opponent uses a Marnie. We don't want to deck out here. My opponent is going to be playing a level ball of their own though, which gets them a Drizzle into play. They can search out a good few cards here. They're going to be using Shady Dealings. What will they go for? Just another Scoop Up Net. That is Scoop Up Net number 3. Certainly going to be healing a lot of damage with those nets. They're going to be stacking up some more damage on our benched Orbeetle VMax as well. The most heavily damaged one with 220 damage on it already. Getting very close to being knocked out, but we do have Cheryl in our hand already, so we can make use of it once again on this following turn here. My opponent gives us a well played, but it's not quite game. Ah, they have the boss's orders, that is a shame. They did find the boss in order to bring up our heavily damaged VMAX, and that is going to be enough for them to get the knockout on the VMAX there. Very unfortunate, but Decidueye is a very difficult deck to play against when you are focused on V and VMAX Pokemon for sure. So that is going to be it for this video. It still shows off the power of Orbeetle VMax, as it really shows the fact that you can continuously use Eerie Beam while healing, and it does also show off the consistency of the deck thanks to the Cincedo as well as the Snorlax as well. Put in a decent amount of work throughout those games. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, give it a like, and I'll see you in the next one.